All right. Hello, Rene. Welcome. We're going to brand our new show off the bat. Welcome.
Yeah, great. I had such a great time chatting with you last time, and it's lucky to be back again and sharing some of the stuff we've been finding online, finding content for our newsletter,
Mm.
and also sharing some other insights and things that I believe will help people in business, people building startups, and people working in business that have tech that are impacting those businesses. So
Mm.
keen to share more about that.
Welcome to the 50th and the 1 year anniversary of How Would You Build It? It's been a fantastic year. Like I've said in the past, it's like an MBA. Every week we've had such amazing people come join us on the podcast. And as much as I'd love to highlight something from every guest, as they've been so amazing, we've decided to just pick a few of our favorites, some things that have stood out and resonated with us on the show. I hope you enjoyed, and thank you very much for supporting us. Remember to hit that subscribe, like us, and support us. Follow us along the way, and looking forward to the next 50 and the next year. For now, enjoy the highlights reel that we have for you. First up, we have Velani, the founder of Lula, and he introduced us to the dynamics of starting a passenger transport company in South Africa. He shared some insane insights into the intricate industry before sharing this great advice for any aspiring founder.
Renier mentioned either working at corporate or starting a company, but there's actually a midpoint to that, which is actually working at a startup. And working at a startup has such enormous propensity to accelerate your career in the sense that you are so close to the fire as an employee of a startup that you're feeling the heat that you would probably never feel sitting at Nedbank or Investec or Discovery. With all due
The
respect.
heat or the explosion, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. You feel that, right? Like if salaries aren't going to be paid at the end of the month, you quickly find out about that very quickly, right? And
Yeah.
you kind of get told about like what is the reason why salaries may not be paid? What do we
Yeah.
have to do together as a collective to try and make sure that we don't find ourselves in this position? So being
Yeah.
able to see that firsthand and understand decision-making processes, where revenue comes from, what is the cost base, what are we relying on, all of that can actually help you accelerate your career in terms of being firstly accountable, responsible, and seeing the bigger picture that a corporate job can't get. So I would really encourage anyone who's maybe thinking of starting a startup, but is maybe too scared, doesn't have the resources, go join like a seed stage
I
company
love
or a
it.
Series A or a Series B. Companies like Yoko, Luno, Mama Money, Lula, all of us, join
Yeah.
us because
Yeah.
we will put you closer to the fire,
Yeah.
and you'll learn because no two
Yeah.
days are the same, and that's what you'll go through even as a founder
100%.
prior to getting that off the ground.
Next up, we have Matt, and after working with him on previous projects in the past, where we validated ideas together, it was a no-brainer inviting him onto the podcast where he shared incredible insights into those early stages of startup ideas.
It's very well known in the world of venture building, incubators, and startups. Ideas are cheap. I'm sorry to say everyone has them. The money is in the execution. The money is in the courage in following through and the bravery to following through. I believe in like building a business is 80% logic and 20% magic. And that magic comes sometimes in that team chemistry. So an assumption is I assume that real estate agents will use a tool that better canvasses opportunities for them, or my tool. Now, a hypothesis goes one layer deeper. It's more granular because it speaks to your tool. An assumption speaks to your tool, and a hypothesis will actually speak to an element within it. In other words, like they will be willing to use a web app. They will be willing to pay $10 for this application. And it's in that definite. So it's like taking in one assumption and making 5 hypotheses that underpin that assumption.
Okay. Cool.
If that makes sense. And what we do is we go through a rigorous process. I'm not saying it has to be rigorous. I'm saying that if you have an idea as a person, what you should do is you should just start mapping these assumptions. What are all these assumptions? And you should come up with about 10 or 15. And there's another model which people should look at when it comes to validating business ideas, and it speaks to 3 concepts. Sorry, I'm trying to speak as I'll give examples for each of these now, which is your idea desirable? Is it desirable by people? Is there an actual need or problem that it solves for? Desirability. Now, it is the most important thing for any business idea. If it is not desirable, you do not have a business. And so desirability is the most important factor. Then there's other two factors which more speak to a business, which are, is it feasible? And this is very important because this speaks to, is this possible? Like, we all want to build a house. But is it feasible for, number one, for me to build that house? Can I get the builders? Do the tools exist? Does the materials exist? Can I easily get them? Is there a way to get a loan? So the feasibility, is there space for that? There's many things around feasibility. So that's why, like, a house is a great example. And then the last one is speaks to viability. And viability speaks to the commercial side of a business model. It speaks to, is there enough money, or can I make enough money to make this viable? So that speaks to rather capital and pricing. Now, these are the three things. So desirable, is it feasible, and is it viable? And assumptions are mapped to these three theoretical ideas. And that's the way that the model works. And up until a couple of months ago, we used to prioritize each of them the same, and I used to prioritize each of these the same. So the model work is you have feasibility, viability, and desirability. Each of these have assumptions, and each of these assumptions have hypotheses. And each hypothesis will have, now we're getting one layer deeper, to an experiment. Now, this is a very fancy name for just doing something to prove that. So this is what I teach a founder. So you'll be a founder, you have a business idea in property, a SaaS or software as a service within property, and you assume that estate agents want to solve a canvassing idea by getting inventory quicker. So I will say, okay, your assumption is that estate agents find it very difficult to canvass for new properties. So that's your assumption. So I'll be like, okay, do we know that? They'll be like, no, we don't know that. And I will then go one layer deep and say, our hypothesis is estate agents are willing to pay $10 for a tool that will show them better inventory. So I'll be like, okay, that's our hypothesis. Then the final layer is I need to prove or disprove a hypothesis. So what happens then is we have to do something to actually do that, which comes in the form of one of two things, to be honest. It comes in quantitative data or qualitative data. And to an early stage founder, I really believe in qualitative data.
And then we have Zanele, and she helped 2024 start off with a huge bang. We got a lot more bang for our buck on this one from the Wella Health founder, as she shared her stories and mistakes to avoid as a startup founder. But what really got to me was a story about the personality trait that is needed to start by being bolder than you can imagine. It's super inspiring. You need to listen to this.
Yeah. Amazing. How did you get to San Francisco? What was the setup there? Like, how did you get there?
Okay, so I'm an all or nothing type of person. So I was like, okay, I come from like your 50-page business plan, traditional business. Tech is a different ball game. So if I'm going to learn about this, if I'm going to give the next half of my life to this, because I was 38 when I started in tech, I was like, if I'm going to give the next chapter of my entrepreneurial life in this, I have to go to the genesis of it, and I have to learn about it, where it started and where it's more vibrant. And for me, that was San Francisco. That was Silicon Valley. But that time I was super broke. So broke, the only thing I had to my name was an old Corsa Skadonki that was 400,000 kilometers to the clock.
Wow.
I was broke, staying with my mom and my 3 kids because my business went under. I had to leave Joburg, go back to Rustenburg, go and basically start from scratch, but this time with 3 kids in tow. And I went to my friends who were in business, and I was like, because I still had my US visa, the 10-year one, travel one, to say, hey guys, I want to go to San Francisco. You know, Bobby, can you help me out with a plane ticket? Lerato, can you help me out with accommodation, etc., etc.? And nobody wanted to give me money to go and research, because I wanted to go and research and see and learn about this industry. But as fate would have it, I got into an accident with that donkey, and insurance paid me 35,000 rands. And I was
Oh,
like,
wow. That's
I
my
was like,
ticket.
yes. I was like, that's my ticket.
Incredible.
And mom thought I was crazy. It was because they said, number one, you're not a geek. You only know tenders and contracts and things like this. This is new. This is your last money. Like my mom was saying, why don't you just pay yourself 2,500 per month until you up on your feet again, because you don't have money. And I was like, no, I'm going. So I literally told myself that I was going to create my own accelerator program, because that time you still knew you're not going to get into any accelerator or incubator, etc. And yeah, so I bought.
Did you have an idea at this point, like what you wanted to get into?
No idea at this point. But I was like, I'm drawn to this. I need to know more. I need to find out more, and I need to go to the genesis of it all. So once I found out more, then I'll decide if I'm going all in or if it's not for me. And I don't want to Google this. I need to be in the space with my character of, going all in everything that I set my heart into. And then I bought an Emirates. That time the ticket was around 14 to 16 return to San Francisco. Didn't know a soul in San Francisco. But for me, my incubator was going to be Eventbrite. So you go into their website and you look into, you say founder events, startup events, entrepreneurial events. So there'll be something for $10 in downtown Market Street, San Francisco. There'll be something for free in Palo Alto. There's something for etc. And you eat at those events. So remember that time you don't have enough money. I was staying in Fremont, which was like your Hammanskraal, but close to the expensive places in San Francisco. And in the US, it's cheaper to use public transport. So in the morning, I'll be somewhere in Palo Alto, attending an event. During the day, I'll be somewhere in Market Street attending an event. At night, I'll be somewhere in another part of San Francisco attending an event. Wow. And then I came into things called, what do they call them? Office hours, where you sit with somebody who's at Amazon, who's at Twitter, who's at etc. Somebody also who's built or exited, that 1 hour, and you just find out things. Like I didn't even know what a pitch deck was, or even if a pitch deck existed, until I was in San Francisco, when I was in another event, because another event will beget another. A person will also invite you, even if it's not Eventbrite, say, hey, there's something, there's always something happening there every day. That was in 2019. So I was in this female founder event, and this lady who was a partner at, head of partnership at Uber, asked me if I have a pitch deck. Because that time now I was starting to play around with ideas, because now you are in that energy and all of that.
Yes.
So I was playing around with ideas. So my idea at that time was to bring the Stockfell model to the US and help
you wanted to take it that way?
Yes. I wanted to help their students pay student debt, because I saw there was a problem in the US student debt. To say, okay, why don't you pull together and help each other pay your student debt once you start working?
After completing a successful exit, Andrew shared priceless insights into building a business from the ground up on the back of new technology. This nugget he shared rang really true for me as a product manager, but I'm sure it resonates for any builder out there.
For founders or businesses who are struggling to find that niche, to steal a term from software development, is iterate over perfection, iteration over perfection. So rather than doing a full pivot and go do a 180 on what's not working, is just keep iterating till you find your niche. I find business in the beginning, it's about survival till you get momentum and traction. And then you start building out those essential things that an investor is looking at for strategic reasons. So I just want to encourage the founders out there is, just hang in there. Make sure you've got the good fundamentals from a cash flow perspective to keep you going. Iterate till you get your sweet spot where you validate it almost in your own sense, your own product market fit, where I can do great work, it's worthwhile, and I can show shareholder value.
And then we have Bubu, which is such a fun interview. Great episode. And he shared so many amazing insights into no-code and low-code solutions as a founder. And here he shares his experience building out an MVP. Another episode definitely for the books.
So I think another mistake that I did was, and it's funny, we did this mistake more than once, and we thought we had learned from the mistake, but only the third time I was like, no, actually. So as I mentioned, we started Dropbox like when we were still varsity students, like in 2015, and we read the Lean Startup, and we were like, oh, the Lean Startup said you must have an MVP. So in our heads, an MVP was a platform technology that was working. So we spent a year building the crappiest platform you can ever imagine. It worked. And we were ridiculously proud of what we built. And we should be, and we should have been. We were varsity students. We built like a tech platform that was connecting students and businesses. It was like the coolest thing. But that platform was very buggy. It was very broken. And we were so obsessed with building the platform, we actually didn't think about building our business. And then we shut down Dropbox for a couple of years because we graduated, and your parents were like, "Is this going to pay your bills?" And we're like, "No." So we had to shut it down. Well, we had to shut it down. We had to, get a little bit real about life. And then we were invited to an accelerator program in 2019. And by the time we got to the accelerator program, I had started another startup. I'd attended like a 500 startups program, and I was like, I know everything you can know about startups. I'm the hot stuff. I can do whatever. And Bobby, you cannot believe what is the first thing we said we were going to do. Guys, let's build a platform. But this time we're not going to build it to be too complicated. That's what we thought we needed to do. So we're like, no, we need to get a CTO. We need to get devs. We need to get funding so we can be able to, hire a team out to build this thing. But then we're like, no, we're not making the same mistake because last time we didn't speak to users, like whatever. We were still idiots. And only when Dropbox almost died, Dropbox nearly died. In 2021, Dropbox nearly died. We had no money left. We had nothing. And we were like, guys, we need to shut this thing down. And only then did we realize that we can build Dropbox without needing any code. So we were lucky, right? We were a marketplace. And now this applies to people who are not in deep tech. This piece of advice I'm going to give. Dropbox was built off Google Forms, Notion, and Airtable. And with that, we were able to raise our last round of funding that we raised. We didn't have working tech. But because we realized that, guys, before you build your MVP, you actually need a POC. You need a proof of concept. You need to actually prove to the world that, guys, my idea works. Here's evidence that it works. Once we've got that evidence, now it's like, okay, can you give us funding so we can build on top of this? Or now we can start building the platform or whatever it may be. So the biggest piece of advice I can give to anyone who is trying to start a startup, first, prove your concept. Before you go hire any developer, before you go take a bunch of money and throw it in there, before you even try to raise venture funding, because I actually promise you're not going to raise any funding if you don't have a platform. I have problems with that, but you're not going to raise any funding. They want to see the tech. Go and prove that your concept works. Once you've proven that your concept works, once you've been able to actually get revenue, not just users. I know there was this other AI startup that's just raised from Andreessen Horowitz, but the use case is a little bit different. They will raise like no revenue, but if you look at like their stats, their monthly active users, blah, 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 that stuff look great. But go and actually get paid. Because it's one thing having like a letter of intent or someone who's like, I'm key. Go get actual money into your bank account. Once you've done that, you've proved your concept. Then go build your tech. So if I could go back to old Bubu, I'd be like, bro, just use Google Forms. Use Google Forms. See if this thing works. And now we've got like a very interesting product culture or thesis that we use. Before we build anything now, we literally go and say, okay, cool, can I build this in a hacky way? Using like no-code tools and low-code tools, whether it be Glide, whether it be software, whatever it is. We go build that, then we take that out and show it to people, get people to use it. And if people are like, okay, cool, this is great, then we're like, okay, cool, developers, go and put time into actually making this thing work for us, rather than just trying to build for the sake of building. Yeah, man, like you just fall into this trap And that's why we've got this trap of, I need funding because I need developers. Because a lot of the time, it's not us people that can do the development who come up with the startups in South Africa. Yes, in the States, most of the time, like the people were engineers first. Even if they weren't the greatest engineers, they were engineers first. Here, from what I've seen, it really hasn't been the case. A lot of South African founders don't know how to write a single line of code.
Catherine, a fan favorite, who also joined us on our first webinar, unpacked the advancements of AI for us. But the piece I picked out is the advice for non-technical founders that she gave as we dive into how important the role is outside of tech. And I think this works well on the back of the Bubu insights we just heard.
What has it been like for you as a founder in the space, you know, being non-technical and being able to make a success out of it? Because I think a lot of people struggle. They see it as a block. And they go and source somebody to go help them and, you know, go to India or whatever it is, you know, just to kind of help get that technical knowledge, because we are suffocated for it here in this country, on this continent. So just what's your kind of advice for non-technical founders, the like?
I guess advice, point number one is don't get stuck on Mount Stupid. If anyone's ever seen that graph, with this idea that you think you just know enough, and that's where you get stuck, and then you really kind of go down, and then you go up on the next side. I think my strategy has always been, you know, work with people smarter than you and stick to what you know well. I do, obviously, because I'm curious by nature, I do my level best to understand the tools and the frameworks that we work with, but I'm not technical. I don't code. And here I am wrangling like a really large team of extremely smart engineers and data scientists. And we, you know, I'm very, very fortunate that I have a technical co-founder, one of the best. And I think my strategy has always been, when I'm having a fat dog with a frisbee moment, you know, it just goes right over your head and you can't jump high enough, just tell people you don't understand. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges founders have, especially, I would say, not to grossly generalize, but I think female founders in particular, it's like hard to say we don't know, right? Because you're expected to be more than. And so in my case, I've just always kind of been open to saying, I don't know, but I'll find out. And then putting in the hard work to try and understand it. No one's asking you to do heart surgery, but you can at least go and read up on what heart surgery entails and, you know, what the methods are and so forth. And yeah, I think it's just about vulnerability and a real sense of curiosity. Like, and it's just, I know enough to know I know nothing. I always want to know more. And having smart people around you.
Yeah.
It's worked for me thus far, so we'll see.
But I think those two things, I mean, you can't, the only way that you'll admit that there are smarter people than you in a room is by being curious and understanding that you don't know everything. So, you know, you can't really do the one without the other. If you think you're really smart, reality is you won't think other people are smart and then you won't learn. So I think it really starts with admitting that you don't know everything, and that's okay. So I love that thought. I've often seen founders actually play on either one of those spectrums. Either they know it alls or they know nothing and then they completely back out. But that middle ground of going, I don't know, but I'm going to figure it out, is probably the right way to do it. So I love that thinking.
Yeah. You know, I've realized I recently met a chap by the name of Adeo Resi, and he's the founder of Founders Fund and started Life on Mars with Elon Musk. They were roommates, if I've got my story straight. And it is insane to listen to people talk. They have the craziest ideas, and they just absolutely 100% convinced that they will execute. Not only they're convinced, they do execute. So I think there's this thing about having wild and brave enough ideas and being brave enough to execute. And then I think also having the tenacity, like there's that, we always talk about like what could founders do better? You know, what are the things you learn? I think there's grit. I know it, Ben. Like just keep on keeping on. And the art of storytelling. You've got to convince your investors, your team, your customers, yourself, your family. Like you've got to convince people that this is possible. And I think those two skills for any founder is super important. And those are not skills you learned at a university or from someone else. That's just pure, like, figure it out. I think what the one thing we underestimate is we seem to think that, like, we have to know everything to be able to do something. I knew absolutely nothing about the music world when I started. Like, I was married to a rock and roller at one point. I worked with music festivals, like ends there, right? Been to every great music festival out there, but I didn't know what it took to build a platform, figure out label and licensing agreements, anything about raising capital or investors. I ended up with a investor list called the Mortal Kombat investor list, because I tracked every single investment in music and entertainment across the US, Africa, Europe, and the Middle East. I looked at funds of funds, who'd reinvested, why they invested into those companies repeatedly, who failed. I mean, it's a thing of beauty. And it's just about going deep and being prepared to put in the work to figure it out.
Andre, a national favorite, helping many South Africans navigate the complex world of tax. We spoke about registering companies, and this advice he shared has stuck with me. And I think many first-time founders could appreciate avoiding the complications when building out your founding team.
I've stepped into what they call a sinkhole of sand, and then it's a slow sink because you go into with the wrong business partners. What I love about sole proprietors is you can be very flexible in terms of commercial law of what the economics look like. So if you've partnered with somebody and they're very much with you in this thing, you can easily do a revenue share contract just to start off with and see how that goes. With a revenue share contract, it isn't as airtight as a classic business-to-business service level agreement, but it is something that keeps it two parties, and you have it done by a lawyer. And so if something happens, even as a sole proprietor, there is still that contractual obligation between separate people. And either revenue share or a profit share, and it's easy to later on change the contract and say this is now a proper business-to-business contract. It was in my personal name. You redo the contract with the same terms. Because the other thing that you don't want to do is you don't want to launch a PTY. You have these partners, but then you sign a thing that's equally split, 30-30 or 33-33-33, or it's 50-50. And those are the worst business share structures that you can do, because it's never 50-50. It's always 70-30. Or it's always 75-25, and the reason being is there's always one Kunane who's doing most of the things and doing most of the rainmaking. So that's why being a sole proprietor and having an agreement on rev split just to test the relationships of the first, let's say, 3 to 4 months or a year. How does these things run, so that you have a track record, and then you can say, okay, we're doing this thing in a PTY, but these check boxes need to be ticked.
One of our early guests, Dylan from Beeline, who is building an edtech platform, said something that rings over and over in my head since the interview, and it is understanding the difference between SaaS and SaaS. Pay attention.
Something that we also heard from the JobJack guys and a couple of other companies in the space is like us SaaS companies coming in a South African setting are often not coming in as just purely software as a service, but rather software and a service. And like having that service offering bolted on top of your SaaS has been quite common, that we've seen across the board, and has been very useful to us as well. So and that also adds to using a local company as opposed to an international company, because our service offering is more tailored to the South African setting. And I mean, yes, like we are pushing in South Africa currently as our core market to drive testing in and to expand in. But I mean, it's an international product that we're building, but it's like settling it in here at home first, and that's having that home ground advantage does add to that moat, as Renier was mentioning.
Dylan, I'm going to steal that term, software and the service. That's going.
I stole it from Heine, so you got to note Heine then.
but it's so true. It's so true. Like, it sweeps out everyone. We were building an app or whatever, but it was actually the service on the back end that was actually driving whether this thing was going to be a success or not.
Building on from Dylan, who shared advice he received from Heine. So here we have Heine, the co-founder of JobJack, where he shares super practical advice into building your first B2B sales funnel.
I'd love to pivot the conversation towards your B2B strategy, because clearly with JobJack and with this side of the game, which is, the supply as such, that's the easy part. But for yourself and for most founders, regardless of the industry that they're trying to tap into, getting those sales is very difficult. So you've spoken about, phoning wine farms and getting in touch with the pep guys, whatever. But for a lot of founders out there that are trying to get that proof of concept or to try and understand if they've got something that's worth selling, can you just tell us about that early stage when you were phoning them around? What kind of tips could you give founders that are maybe in that same position right now?
100%. So I think just step one is persistence. In those early days, especially now that I'm able to compare it to when we now have a lot of big brands we work with, and it's I think Ramir might have said it's a lot easier for us to call a big company now, mention all of the big other companies that work with us and get a meeting. Whereas at the start, it was all about just getting a meeting. And in the early days, it was purely persistence and you needed to have some luck. So I mentioned calling all of those wine farms. That's literally it. Your rejection rate was super high. You maybe got 1 out of 100 hit, but you had to put in the 100 calls to get the one. And then once you got the one, to start using that case study, I can put it like that. Like you need, it becomes 10 times easier to get a meeting if you can refer to some kind of a success story. So I remember when I started diving into the KFC groups, like we were getting no traction, and then through persistence, we got our first KFC group. And with that name, we were able to then call all of the same KFC groups who said no previously, and now we could say, and this group is making use of JobJack. Then you got your second and your third and your fourth one. And then you could call all of them again, and you can now mention 4 that are using JobJack. So it's franchise groups. And now you had the 4, and now you get another thing. And so you need persistence to get the first one. Once you have the first one, you need to start using that name. We were lucky because we got into a pilot with Pep at an early stage. And I think that's maybe a trick. You mentioned all of our LinkedIn posts about clients. That helps a lot. But people don't always go read the detail underneath the post. A lot of those posts are pilot posts. So we got a pilot with the client. It's not necessarily a full rollout. No one reads that. They think JobJack has landed some big client. And literally, I'll sit in a sales meeting, and then a client is saying, we saw that you got X big client. We also want to become part of this. And they have FOMO. In reality, we just landed a 10-store pilot. They didn't go read the detail. I mean, we're not going to correct them. And in the early days, that helps a lot. Whereas now, obviously, it's actual clients rolling out and so forth. But in the early days, celebrate anything. Put a photo on LinkedIn that says, I got a meeting with this client. People won't necessarily read. So that's just a thought.
And there's some absolute gold in what you shared. So I actually want to pause on a few points, right? So I think firstly, I think most founders that I've worked with in the early days completely underestimate the amount of rejection you're going to face in order to get one meeting. Okay, you said 1 out of 100. I mean, let's talk about practically. Do you literally phone 100 people in a month, and then everybody says no, and you just go, let me phone the next guy? Is that how you did it, or were you talking about it was like 100 over a period of time? Like what was the frequency of trying to make this work?
So I remember this is 5-6 years ago, but I would call in batches. So you'll obviously do research on potential leads, put out a batch of say 30 leads, and then start calling. But what often happens is you learn so much by calling. Like you're going to make a fool of yourself the first 10 calls, no questions asked. But that's okay because you're going to learn so much. So I would typically not get through a batch of calls because partially into that batch of calls, there will be learnings. And then I will go and rewrite the script that I had. I will go rewrite a proposal if it's at that stage. So you're constantly improving the way that you approach. And the only way you know what to improve on is by actually speaking to the people. So not 101 shot, because there's learnings throughout.
Ben Blaine comes from a wealth of history of working at successful startups in South Africa, and he has war stories for days. But this story in particular really got the juices flowing about doing things that don't scale. You really, really need to listen to this one.
I know we're way over time, but I wanted to go back to the weekend market story. So I'll try to say this super quickly. First weekend at a weekend market, we were like, this is the gold mine because there's no card machines here. It's before Yoko and all that stuff. So we're like, we're going to clean up here. This is going to be like slam dunk. We get there, everyone's like, hard no. I don't want this thing. I'm like, I'm going to give you 25 Rand vouchers. Every single person at this market's going to have a 25 Rand voucher. We're like 2 people to sign up the first weekend. And it's because they don't want to be recorded electronically, their income for tax purposes. They're just like avoiding tax basically. So it's like, but I'm like, okay, but you can literally like increase your possible takings from a weekend. You can sell out if you have SnapScan. And so 2 people took it. I gave everyone who came to the market a 25 Rand voucher to download SnapScan and to use SnapScan. That also helped. And then I just said like those 2 stores, just go first to those 2 stores. So basically those 2 stores got like a free sales agent with giving away free money. And the next weekend, 10 people were waiting for me and to sign up because they were like, Ben sells our stuff. Like when we sign up to SnapScan, it comes with a free salesperson and like a funnel of money. And so then the next weekend, and half the market was like, we need to boycott this. And then the other half was like, Ben, just get me Ben. Like he's the guy who's just gonna sell all my fucking soap. Okay. And or my fudge or whatever. And so the next weekend, those 10 guys like did crazy sales, and now it's buzzing at the market. Like a bunch of people are using this thing. There's arguments, like I'm not giving my phone details, my card details. Oh, you're such a stuck up, like get involved in those arguments, pit people against each other. Like it's a social dynamic thing. Third weekend, it's like markets completely signed up. The ATM goes down. Everyone's like, give me SnapScan now. Give me SnapScan now. The ATM is down. No one can draw money. And like, so you need like, yeah, it's like in 3 weeks that went from like a complete fail to just a wipeout as we originally thought.
Yeah.
And I was asking the development team, they were trying to build like banking stuff. Oh my gosh, it's going to be banking stuff. And I'm like asking them for like little features for like weekend flea markets. They want to add, you know, this and that. They want to have, I don't know what, I can't even remember, like a logo, or I need like an FAQ in the app or something. And they were like, oh, why are you bugging us with this like low level crap? And I'm like, okay, fine, you guys run the market. Like you go. And so they came to the second weekend because they couldn't understand why I got no signups. And they were like, holy crap, this is a for real situation.
I love that story so much. I really love that story.
Yeah. And they were like, okay, Ben, we can see like what you're dealing with here. Like we're gonna help. We're gonna
we're building the frequently asked questions.
Yes, and like and I don't know what it was. It was probably something to do with the voucher system. It like was clunky or something, like giving people vouchers. At the start we had 25 Rand if you sign up for SnapScan. Those things all help. Those things are
I love it. It's being close to the problem, being close to the customer, and actually understanding the problem. I love that. That's the biggest takeaway.
Ben and Lorne are the authors of The First Kudu, a book about building a failed startup, another community favorite, and here they shared how they implemented the so-called Marketplace Bible into their prop tech startup.
I want to go into HouseMe specifically. Lorne, when you joined the company, you know, there was a lot of talk about HouseMe was a marketplace, and there was a marketplace Bible that Ben developed based on a lot of other insights that he learned from different places around marketplaces. The HouseMe Bible, I think it was called, if I recall correctly. And there was 4 of the 5 boxes were ticked. Maybe speak a bit about that. Which box wasn't ticked? How did you solve that? I think marketplaces is still an exciting topic, although it's lost a lot of flavor after a lot of people lost a lot of money. But I do think there's still a place for it, and would love to hear your thoughts on it.
Absolutely. So Bill Gurley originally wrote the 10 factors that would need to be in place for a marketplace to be successful. And then Kenyans and Verts turned that into 5. And those 5 became the Marketplace Bible. And I think it's just important to reference the people who were the source of that information. And really what they did is they said, you know, you're more likely to be successful the better you are on these 5. And the first was operate in a space of high fragmentation. So a space where there are lots of buyers and lots of sellers gives you an opportunity to centralize and connect people, really, because that's really what a marketplace does at the end of the day. A next one was this idea of playing the field, so not really being loyal. So in medical supplies, you're very loyal to your GP. You're not going to search around for someone who's 50 Rand cheaper for your next GP appointment. But in a space where people play the field a bit more, there's a lot more opportunity for a marketplace. The third is frequency of payment is very important. So you want there to be high frequency engagement so that you drive network effect and people talk about you. So you need reasons for them to come back. It's not you sell to them once and then 3 years later they come back for the next one. The fourth one is total addressable market needs to be of a certain size. So you need a large total addressable market. But an interesting point they make as well is that if you are innovative enough, you can actually grow the total addressable market by adding additional value to the marketplace. And happy to dive into that in a separate tangent if you'd like to. And then critically, you need to be part of the transaction flow, as in order for you to take your small cut of fees, you must facilitate the payment. And the higher you can score on those, the better positioned you are. And really, that was something that Ben sent to me early on. He said, please, will you read through these? This is the thinking that we've done and how we're trying to apply it. So I'm sure Ben will have a bit to add on his thinking and how it applied to HouseMe.
But we forced every employee to read it at least once a year, and all of our board had to read it before they could join. I didn't quite go as far as putting out quizzes, but it wasn't far off to make sure that we could all understand the reason that the company could get built. Lorne's explained exactly what it is that what provides the platform for success, but what a more common way of reviewing it as an investor.
Another inspiring leader who is busy shaping a new generation of entrepreneurs in the township, Luvuyo. A fantastic episode where he shared the amazing opportunities that are brewing up in the local townships.
It's quite interesting because, even with the township, like Kaili, Chagugulechu, and Nyanga, and Nanga,
Cape Town,
just playing, they are totally different. I mean, Soweto to Mlazi, and so those are totally different, different township now. So I think we're able to localize it from day one, like make sure that we employ people from the community, make sure that we've got much more stakeholders engagement with the local radio station, local radio newspapers. We work with the stakeholders in the areas that, to make sure that they feel they are part of that. And over time, I think by 2014, we were able to kind of franchise now to have franchise champions. Like people who are entrepreneurs that in that areas. But some of our graduation for students, you will see that their mayors are coming in now for those sessions that myself I couldn't access because I'm not connected with the politician, but because the local entrepreneurs there have access around that. So we're trying in terms of how we're able to localize it.
This brings us to Danielle from Wigwag, who are busy building a payment solution for businesses leveraging WhatsApp, a strong trend that I feel many people should be paying attention to. And here's why.
But Danielle, that's not only applicable to, Dean's Cupcakes. If I do plumbing services, then, a lot of people have started using WhatsApp Business to, just organize their business in. This is something that they can use as well.
Absolutely. So in terms of WhatsApp Business, that's been super interesting for us to watch. We've seen a large take up specifically in service businesses, so nail technicians, businesses selling goods that are on custom order, as well as restaurants, actually. We've seen a lot of restaurants who want to take delivery orders, but they don't necessarily want to pay the fees of the delivery app. So they've actually set up, they've got their own driver and they take orders over WhatsApp. And that's obviously the WhatsApp Business app. But if we then take a look at the WhatsApp Business platform, which obviously has a bit more technical abilities, we've seen some really cool stuff happening there too. So we actually have a customer he runs a small ISP in a few areas in Johannesburg, and he actually runs his monthly billing through WhatsApp with the Wigwag link. So he's written a really basic script that runs through all of his customer list every month, sends them a WhatsApp with a Wigwag link, and they can simply pay with their card.
But this is actually fascinating because you touched on the food deliveries. And if you think about it, one of Uber Eats as an example, they offer the product really offers three different things, right? So the first thing is product discovery. So, hey, what do you feel like eating? So now I go, sushi, who's got sushi around here? This sushi special looks nice. So that's the first thing. The second thing is payments, right? And then the third part is the delivery part, which, is kind of location specific. So all of that integrated gives you Uber Eats, and coincidentally also gives you Uber, right? Because Uber goes, I need to find a driver, I need to find his location, and I need to be able to pay. So, but what you're saying is effectively the combination of WhatsApp and your payment solution pretty much almost gets one day. So you can almost launch a Uber Eats or a Uber, if you will, without having to build any tech really, just switching on payments and using WhatsApp.
Absolutely, that's exactly it. And that's super exciting for these smaller businesses. And I think where it becomes really relevant is once you remove that requirement for a marketplace or for discovery, when they've got, loyal customers that buy takeout every weeknight or something like that. They don't need to discover them. They know that they're there and they just want to order for them. And I think for those restaurants, if they're not necessarily needing that discovery aspect, it's a very expensive price to pay. And so no code, cheaper solution for the use case of regular customers becomes super relevant.
Geez, I'm already thinking about how do you build an airport trips, Stellenbosch to airport trips community, getting some Uber drivers on there in a WhatsApp group, putting out payments and taking a quarter of the fee of Uber and making everyone happy.
Love it. 10 years travel business.
Yes.
So if we have all these amazing opportunities, the only thing left for founders is to be able to sell your story and bring people to your ecosystem. An awesome episode with marketing strategist Dave Duarte, who shared some priceless insights to get your product to the market.
One of the things that I learned for my own coping that's actually been really helpful to me and others is to see any, whether it's a product innovation or marketing innovation or trend in terms of 3 levels that are always true and always in operation at any time. And it's truths, trends, and trifles. So the truths never change. So in marketing, it's all about relationships. You have to present yourself well, so people eat with their eyes first. Packaging matters. All of those things. You've got to have a good story. That was true 100 years ago. It'll be true in 100 years' time. So those things never change. So first of all, master the fundamentals. And the fundamentals these days are, good website, strong product video, excellent product description, snappy copywriting. Just start with the basics before you get too fancy. Trends, then we start talking about, vertical video, influencers and product advocates, referral marketing, all of that. Predictable trends. They didn't just pop up this year. They've been happening. So if we lastly, then trifles is have a little bit of space just for play, doing stuff that may absolutely not work, that's completely silly, that's fun for you. It might be anything from like a little startup event that you want to do, or you want to start a chat group related to it, or I don't know, you're into like some weird activity that you want to link to or sponsor. I don't know, have fun with a little bit of it, and that's trifles. And that could be like we want to experiment with using completely AI driven character creation with our stuff, and we don't know if it'll work. And I definitely would say don't bet the whole ship there, because I think that people pick up when things are completely AI driven, as an example. And I would say that you've got to find your kind of tolerance mix between truths, trends, and titles, but you base your strategy on the truths, get the fundamentals right, and then you take it from there.
And to finish, we have Tramane from Next 176, who dropped many golden nuggets in this episode with his wealth of experience in the space. Here he explains the importance of building with an outcome or exit in mind.
I think this narrative of, we've got to be the unicorn, we've got to push through, we've got to be the biggest business is slightly skewed by our vision, again, of casting ourselves west and casting ourselves to this startup and entrepreneurial narrative that this is the way. We watch the shows about how Google was started and Uber, but there's a lot of pride that can be extracted and a lot of value that can be extracted out of 50, 100 million rand businesses as well. Because if you look at the Time example and you look certainly at the Rain example, there were existing builders in there who had done it all previously. So that funding is really back on reputation and execution of the past. We're trying to play with the entrepreneurs who are building their first or second business, who are quite comfortable with this thing. It's a 200-300 million rand business, and we're quite comfortable with those returns as well, because how we build our studio means that we're quite cost efficient because of the nature of the studio itself. And so the returns and the IRRs on our investments are quite palatable to us, even at those numbers, not necessarily being ready to IPO on the stock exchange, which I think is a misnomer. I think most startups probably don't want to be on the JSE, just from a regulatory point of
Most
view.
companies.
I know listed companies that don't want to be there.
Yeah, exactly.
Trying to get out.
Which actually leads me, Tramane, to the next question, which is around IPO and exits. Like in America, like, you know, that's the VC payday, right? If you don't IPO, you're never gonna 100x your fund. So or even 10x for that matter. So in South Africa, what do exits look like? What is an attractive exit? And I think most importantly, like, where does one exit to?
Yeah, it's a very tricky question, that, and I think it is sort of one of the power players of being a corporate VC, right? Because we've got a natural distribution for an exit as long as it makes sense to our head office and corporate level. And I think beyond that, it's not just our natural exit to, in this case, Old Mutual, but it's also the natural exit to other corporates and being involved in businesses that we believe could help those corporates in their strategic plays. While it is not our core focus to always make sure that we, one, build for this, or two, invest for this, we certainly do feel slightly more comfortable knowing that that is an opportunity for us. We're currently negotiating an exit back into the group as it stands. So we'll get a lot of learnings from what it means to do that. We have another venture that we're about to exit via a partnership to a big global bank as well, where we combine our expertise and capital and de-risk ourselves from the 100% owner to sub-control. So we're spending a lot of time on this very question. I think it's very important is, what does exit look like? And what we've done strategically in December is to say, even when we invest our first check, or when we build our first line of code or business model, we're already talking about exit strategies and starting to ideate and sort of delineate what that looks like in order to do that. When I was at Tencent a few years ago and we started the WeChat fund, one of the things we found every startup was talking about was, I'm just going to build so Google acquires me, or I'm just going to build so Amazon acquires me. It's that sort of thinking and mindset to say, actually, exit is good, exit is great. And if you focus on what they've been exiting, in this old case, Google or Amazon, in terms of what they've been acquiring, you can start strategically pivoting and having conversations for that really early while you build. And I think that's really important for us. And I think it's really important for all entrepreneurs to start ideating on.